Today's episode of The Overwhelmed Brain is brought to you by Native, a clean deodorant that smells great and simply works. For 20% off your first purchase, visit nativedeodorant.com and use the promo code BRAIN during checkout. Life presents the toughest challenges. Every day you are faced with decisions that test your ability to express who you really want to be in this world. We're told to keep saying affirmations and keep thinking positively, but what do you do when that stuff doesn't work? Welcome to The Overwhelmed Brain, where you'll learn to make decisions that are right for you so that you can create the life you want now. Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Paul Coliani and I'm here to help you increase your emotional intelligence so that you can avoid dysfunction, handle toxic situations with grace and ease, and show up as your authentic self. Everything I talk about on this show is my personal opinion and is meant for informational and educational purposes only. Always consult a medical or psychological professional before making any changes that could affect your physical or mental health. Wow. Okay. Just making sure I'm recording here because I just spent probably a good 20 minutes recording or talking without recording. So I'm looking at my screen right now and see that the recording is going on. That's excellent. So we're off to a good start. From 20 minutes ago, it was a good start as well. But now I'm recording. Today, I want to talk about something that happens to us in the holidays. Somebody sent me a message a while ago that says, first, I want to tell you that I love your podcast and advice. I have learned so much about being myself. Great to hear. This person I'm going to call Sharon. She goes on to say, I'm having a dilemma that I was hoping you may have some advice about. My mother has tendencies of borderline personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. That is a huge combination. Okay. Big stuff to deal with there. I moved many states away from her a few years ago, and I would typically return to visit her on the holidays. However, since I have been learning about myself and trying to stand up for myself, I have lost touch with her. I don't have any hard feelings toward her, but she seems to have them toward me. Either way, I'm having trepidation about whether I should return to visit for the holidays. I have other family members and friends that I want to see in that state. However, I'm afraid that my mom, being who she is, will make a big deal about the changes I have made to my self-esteem. And since I am not the person she used to emotionally abuse anymore, I have grown a lot, and I am also worried if I return that old unhealthy patterns may repeat because I still have a soft spot with her since she's my mom. Sorry, I know this is kind of long. Any suggestions? Thank you. Okay, Sharon, that's not long. That is one of the shortest emails I've received. So thank you for writing this and thank you for sharing it, what's going on in your life. And I think a lot of us can relate to that. When we go home to family, it does happen around the holidays. That family is going to expect the person they've always known in their life, which is the old you. And when you show up as the old you, everyone's comfortable. When you show up as the new and improved you, with increased self-worth, increased self-esteem, self-compassion, self-love, and this new thing called personal boundaries, when you show up as this person, they are uncomfortable. I mean, a lot of people will get uncomfortable with this new person because they were used to treating you the same way they are used to treating you. And what this does is create a dynamic that they hope doesn't change. And when it does, you become the troublesome person in the relationship. You can become the troublesome person. And what I mean by that is that you shake up the reality. You rock the boat. And if you're shaking up their reality and they're not ready to change and they're not the type of people that do change, you're not going to necessarily be comfortable. Because that's what happens. You show up as your new self, you make them uncomfortable. And you make yourself uncomfortable too. Because you're going to have to deal with that now. Because their uncomfortableness will come out in a number of ways. However, if you show up as your old self, you make them comfortable, but make yourself uncomfortable. So there's really two ways to go about this. The first one is you show up as your new self, you make them uncomfortable and you uncomfortable, or you show up as your old self and you make everyone comfortable except for you. So what ends up happening is you have to make a choice. You have to make a choice between showing up as this new and improved self or the old self that just gets along with everyone, or they're more comfortable with this old self of yours. The problem with that, of course, is that showing up as your old self, you then kind of throw away some of the things you've learned about yourself, especially if they are toxic, especially if they're emotionally abusive in some sort of way. And if you throw that stuff away, then you feel like you've taken some big steps backward. And then all this work that you did, where'd it go? What was the point? Did you do all this work to show up in the world as a different person for everyone else? Or is there exclusions for family? I think you have to be really careful about this, because in order to improve yourself, usually you're improving yourself because of the most challenging people in your life. Not the only reason, but when you want to show up differently, new and improved, stronger in your integrity and your character, then the ultimate test is family. They're the ones that will either see the new you or not. And if you decide to bring the new you to them, that will be your challenge, that if you overcome, you can face the world. You can face the entire world with this new improved you. And when you face the entire world, you can take on any challenge that comes your way. So that's the upside down funnel effect. You start small with your family, and when you overcome that challenge, you get a little bigger into your friends and your environments, like your work and maybe home. And then you go out further where you meet strangers and you are creating new relationships and networking, and keep widening that funnel. And suddenly you are the person that you love being most to everyone. But when you start at family, that is your graduation process into a better place inside yourself. And family is the tough one. Family is the toughest one, but it's the big hump that once you're over it, you can usually do the rest a little easier. It's not always easy, but it's a little easier after you do family. So let's think about the challenge of showing up at your family's door after some personal growth and development in your life. The question or challenge for you is, who are you going to be when you walk in the door? When you walk in the door, are you going to be this new person or this old person they've always known? And the reason this is a challenge is because there's probably a part of you, if you're listening to this show, you probably are always improving yourself. You're working on yourself. There's probably a part of you that is still, I don't want to say clinging onto, but still has a small grasp or hold on the old you. And so I want you to examine this part of you. Why do I still have a grasp or a hold of the old me? Because you know the old you. You've been the old you for a long time, and now you've improved that. Now you've graduated out of that. You've evolved. Or you're still evolving, as we all are. We're still evolving. We're still working on ourselves. But there are certain behaviors in our past that have shown up in our lives at certain moments with certain people that maybe we don't want to be anymore. We don't want to do those behaviors anymore. So how do we evolve out of that? The small part of you that has a hold on that has to be told it's okay to let it go. That's scary, but it's liberating. Hey, it's okay to let that small part go because you don't need it anymore. You need certain aspects of it. You need certain components of it, the positive components, the resourceful components, the components that taught you lessons, that gave you good advice, that made you feel good about yourself. Keep all those components. But anything else that's holding on to a past you, that is holding on out of fear, that needs to be let go. And I'm not saying that you do this around dangerous people. This is my disclaimer. And when I talk about volatile, violent, dangerous people in your life, it might not be a good idea to let go of some of the fear around that, because the fear is going to keep you safe. Fear does keep you safe, but fear also inhibits you from improving yourself a lot of the times, or showing up as the person that you want to be in many situations. I think that's the first chapter of my book, The Overwhelmed Brain, Personal Growth for Critical Thinkers. How do you show up for life? That's a question that I ask myself. How am I showing up now? Am I proud of how I'm showing up? If my future self looked back, my future self that has learned so much more and is more emotionally intelligent and has learned how to defend his boundaries so that no one ever crosses the line with him. How does that future self look at me now and feel about what I'm doing? That's not necessarily my process, but that's something I might think about. Like, wow, if I look back on this, how will I feel about what I said or what I did in this moment? And that's a good question to ask yourself in the moment. If I look back at this, how am I going to feel about what happened just now? So when you're in that situation and family starts treating you the same old way, and you don't necessarily feel the same way that you used to feel, and you don't think the same way that you used to think, and they have values and beliefs that you don't, they have certain ideas about the world, they have certain political views that maybe you don't or do share, but not all of them. How do you show up as this new person? And so along your personal growth and development journey, the small part of you that hangs on to the old self, to the old beliefs, to the old values and old ideas and perceptions about the world, that part of you needs to know that it's okay to let go. That's a strange way to say it, but start to get comfortable with that part of you that's afraid to let go. If you can get comfortable with that part of you that's afraid to let go, then maybe it won't be so afraid to let go because there's somebody stronger inside you that can handle it. I want you to be able to say, I can handle this, so that when so-and-so says what they used to say to tick me off, I can handle that. I used to submit. I used to be passive. I used to just walk away and be angry. But this time, I'm going to say, hey, you know what? When you say that to me, it really hurts my feelings. It really feels disrespectful. I would appreciate if you didn't say that to me. And you may not get the results that you want. You may not get what you want to hear. Like what you want to hear is like, wow, I never realized that. I'm so sorry. That probably won't happen. You might get something like, yeah, whatever, punk, or, oh, you think you're better than me, whatever they might say. And we have to come back to ourselves and not go into that little child that we used to be. That's what I did most of my life. I clung on to that little child that was afraid and didn't show up as the adult that I turned into. And when I say adult, I mean just all the qualities that I've developed. It doesn't even have to do with age, just the qualities and the behaviors that I've learned about in myself, that some of them I want to keep and some of them I don't. And so I get rid of the ones I don't and enhance the ones I do. And when I do that, I feel better about myself. I feel stronger in myself. I feel more confident that I can live my life the way I want to live my life. I walk boldly with boundaries and enforce those boundaries, allowing what I love in and what I don't love has to be at a little bit of a distance. I still bring them close to me, but some people I can't bring too close because then they'll get past my boundaries. They'll get past my limits. I have a threshold and you're not allowed to cross that threshold, and I won't let you cross that threshold. And if you do cross that threshold, then I'm going to say something about it. because before I never did. A scary place to be, because some people you can't do this with. Some people you can't win the argument. Some people are dangerous. You just kind of have to avoid them, and hopefully you don't have to deal with them. Unless you have another way to deal with that. You took martial arts or something, whatever it is for you. But I think a good idea is to remember that the way you want to be is what you want to embrace. And the way you don't want to be, that maybe fearful child that you've been for a long time around certain people at least, if you don't want to hold on to that fear anymore, then remember that as you go through your personal growth and development, in order to reach this new space inside of you and show up as the person that you want to be, the old self, it can't be so powerful inside of you that it takes over. In fact, it's important to remember that the old fear that used to kick in and make you do things from a place of fear, that needs to be let go. And I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying it needs to be let go. And you need to get to a point in yourself that you are so comfortable and so confident about your personal growth and development that you almost forget that that old self exists. I tell you what, when you heal and you process and you release, when you do all this self-improvement, it really is like that old self is forgotten. Again, you don't forget the good parts. You don't forget the lessons. You don't forget the experiences. You just forget how you used to act in a unhelpful, unresourceful, and even dysfunctional way. For me, I used to act like a people pleaser. I used to let people walk all over me. I used to say yes when I meant no. And so when I was first presented with the challenge of family showing up in front of them and being able to show up as a new, improved me for the first time in front of certain family members, it was a massive leap of faith. It was scary. I didn't want to do it. This will happen. You don't want to do it, yet you do it because you don't know any other way to act. And what I mean by that is you become so confident in what you've learned and become so proud of who you've become that that person becomes all you know. If you allow that person to be the only person you know, and you're able to let go of the child that used to run the show during the times when you were most fearful, you get to live the life you want. You get to be who you want. But that involves a commitment to personal growth and development. That involves a commitment to exploring your past and figuring out what you still need to heal from. So explore your past. Figure out what you're still holding on to. Do I still hate this person? Well, I shouldn't hate. I mean, this was my dilemma. I shouldn't hate anyone. So I never addressed that I actually hated that person. And when I finally admitted that I must hate that person, and I do hate that person, I was able to let go of that hate. How about, am I still angry with that person? Am I still mad that that person lied to me or betrayed me? Am I still upset that I didn't get what I want in life? Am I still upset that my brother got the inheritance? Am I still upset about this, about this, about this? You think about all these traumas, you might call them, that you're holding on to. Because if you still feel upset about any of these old traumas, then that is the inner child's fears running the show for you. And what I mean by that is when you're in a situation where somebody does cross your boundaries, they do something that doesn't jive with you, who shows up? That fearful inner child or that strong, confident new person, that new adult that you are today? Who shows up? And when you find out who shows up, you learn if you're still holding on to these old fears. And if you are, that's what needs to be addressed. You can't sweep these things under the rug. You have to address old fears, old traumas. And I'm not saying you have to talk about your past all the time. I'm not saying you have to revisit the past over and over again, because some people have gone to therapy and revisited their past thousands and thousands of times. Sometimes all you have to do is do what I've done. Take a leap of faith. Not that I'm the answer man, but if you're afraid of something, find out what you're afraid of by doing the thing you're afraid of. Doing the thing that you're afraid to get the results for. And what that means is if you're afraid to stand up to your mom or dad because they've been cruel all your life, then you finally stand up to them knowing that you're probably not going to get the result you want, but it's not about them. It's not about teaching them a lesson. It's about standing up for you, being in integrity with yourself, being fully integrated about everything you've learned and applying that to the challenge in front of you. And what you might find out is one of two things. People finally decide to accept the new you, or they reject the new you and they don't want to associate with you anymore. Or they reject the new you and have a fight with you. They don't like the new you. They don't want you to change. They only want you to stay who they want you to be so that they don't have to change. And so that they're happy and you're not. These are all dilemmas that we have to go through. Because if we didn't go through these dilemmas, we wouldn't know if we've healed from the past. And some of the healing that needs to take place is our social structure and our communication with the closest people in our lives growing up. And sometimes the closest people in our lives are the mean ones, and sometimes they're the hurtful ones, and we feel the most vulnerable around them because they know us so well. So hopefully you can get to the point where during your personal growth and development, you realize that what you're doing is trying to overwrite old beliefs and old patterns so that you can show up in the world as a new person without a reliance or a fallback to those old beliefs and those old patterns. Because it's so much easier to be the new you when that old you doesn't really exist anymore. And that is a process. And that process does involve addressing anything negative that you feel inside of you that you're still holding on to. For example, I used to feel negative toward people who didn't take a break on me. They would continue asking me to do things I didn't want to do. And I would be angry at them. And so I decided to explore that and think, is this really, if I was responsible for this, how would that be? How does it happen that I'm responsible for any of this? If those people aren't giving me a break and I keep saying yes, wait a minute, that is how I'm responsible. I keep saying yes. If that's the case, I need to change this. I am responsible for myself getting into these situations, getting angry with these people that I believe should see that they're stepping all over me and taking advantage of me. I believe those people should see that about me. However, how am I contributing to that? And once you understand how you contribute to your own unwanted results, then you get to change things. The hard part is changing, though, because you can't necessarily change the dynamic, but you can change yourself. And when you change yourself, the dynamic changes. As soon as I realized that I was not honoring my boundaries and saying no when I meant no, and I started doing that, at first I got some negative feedback, like, what? You always do things and you don't want to do this? And I would say, no, I don't. I have something else. I would rather do something else. Or I don't feel like doing that. How about that? There's no excuse. I just don't feel like it. And I started being more honest about that. And then finally, people started treating me the way I treated myself. And that's the secret. If you want people to treat you a certain way, treat yourself that way. And when you do that, you find out who supports you being you. And then you find out also who doesn't want you to change so that they'll be happy and you won't be. I mean, that's a leap of logic, but it's true. That's where the end result is. If somebody doesn't want you to feel better about yourself and be happy inside yourself, and they would rather have you be the way that they want you to be, then all they really want is to satisfy themselves regardless of how you feel. So this is why it's so important to develop a new foundation in yourself and allow the other you to fall away, because that old you doesn't have to show up anymore. So when you end up at someone's home during the holidays or whenever it is, and they start being their old selves and you have a choice to be your old self or not, It's a lot easier if you didn't even have that choice and didn't even know how to access your old self. Not that you don't know how, but it's less of a default and more of a choice. And when you have the choice instead of just defaulting out of fear, you have a lot more flexibility in how things proceed for you. Before you didn't. Before you felt like it was no choice. Like that's who they are. They treat me like that and I disagree with it and I don't like it, but I deal with it and then it's finally over. However, knowing you have a choice gives you the option to align with them, their beliefs, their values, their perceptions about the world, or stay in alignment with your own. And what does that mean? It might mean you lose some family. It might mean people don't like the new you. And that's not your fault, it's theirs. If they're not willing and open and accepting of who you are, you may never be able to change their mind. And that's not your job anyway. Your job is to show up as your best self. If you're a kind, compassionate person, and they don't necessarily see that about you or see those as positive aspects, then it is good to question who you're hanging out with. This is a challenge. It's a big topic because I know people who they have to go to their wife or their husband's family, and now they have to deal with their family. And that's tough too, but hopefully you have a loved one in your life that if you're visiting their family, your loved one stands up for you. Hey, you can't say that about her. Be careful what you say about him. That's my husband. Or I don't like the way you're treating my partner here, so I suggest you back off. I think when you're spending most or all of your life with someone you love and you go to bed with them and you spend every single day with them, that's probably the most important person in your life and probably the one you should treat the most loving and kind and caring and supportive as you can. And then when family tries to put them down, if you don't stand up for them, how does that look? And I'm not saying you're bad for not doing it if you're scared or whatever, but how does it look to the person that is in your life every single day? It doesn't feel very supportive. It doesn't feel very loved. In fact, it might even feel like everyone's ganging up on them. And so, like I said, this is a huge topic that we can explore several different paths. But for now, I just want you to remember that when you decide to show up as the new and improved you, you will probably get some feedback. You will probably get some looks. And it really depends on who you want to be when you arrive, when you're there, when you leave. And is it possible to be the new you in front of certain people? Sometimes you can't be. Sometimes it's so volatile that being the new you is impossible. And what do you do then? You might have to just wait till it's all over if you don't want to cause any trouble. You don't want to be that person. At the same time, it might behoove you to not go there anymore if you are completely unaccepted anyway. Because who wants to be around people who don't accept you? At that point, it's not really family anymore. I think family's implicit rule is that you accept and love the people in your family no matter what. I mean, that's kind of the unwritten rule. I'm not saying you have to, but that's sort of what you want to believe when you have family, is that they'll love you no matter what. But then you show up as someone else and they don't love you. That takes you out of the family dynamic. That doesn't make any sense if they're not accepting you no matter what, unless you're toxic. I mean, if you're toxic, of course, it's hard to accept someone that's toxic, and it's hard for you to accept someone that's toxic, especially if they never leave you alone, if they never back down. But that's the kind of stuff we're talking about on this episode and in many episodes. So let me take a break here and go to the next segment where I'm going to address this person's email with a story from one of my clients. And it's how he has learned to get along with family who can be difficult. He's figured it out, and I want to share it with you after this. All right, I told you about Native deodorant back in September, and I've talked about them several times since then. So if you haven't visited nativedeodorant.com, and use the promo code BRAIN during checkout to get 20% off, then I highly suggest you at least give it a try. Check them out because both my girlfriend and I love this deodorant. It is the deodorant of choice in this house now. One of the first things that she noticed about this deodorant was there was no animal testing. And there's so many companies, especially the popular ones, that do animal testing still. I mean, do we really need to continue doing animal testing on some of this stuff? You know, that's a political, I don't want to get into that debate right now, but I prefer no animal testing myself. But that's one of the first things she noticed. And I said, yeah, I'm all about that. Awesome. And another thing that Native does is they have no aluminum, parabens, or talc. And so, you know, it's hard to find this stuff that's so free of some ingredients that we see in a lot of other products. In fact, Native is filled with ingredients found in nature, such as coconut oil, which is an antimicrobial, and shea butter, which is moisturizer and emollient, and tapioca starch, which absorbs wetness. And with all the talk about exporting and importing, we don't have to worry about it because Native is made in the USA. So, you know, this might be very important to you. All of these things are along the lines of people's values. We were just talking about values in the last segment. What do you value in what you put on your body? And I think a lot of these values I am in alignment with. I wouldn't have them on my show otherwise. I am definitely in alignment with everything in this bullet list in front of me. They have something for everyone that comes in a wide variety of enticing scents for both men and women. Plus, they release new limited edition seasonal scents throughout the year. And of course, they also offer an unscented formula, which, again, that's something I value too. I mean, I use unscented detergent in my laundry. So having the option to wear no scent at all gives me the choice to wear a scent or not, which I love. But I also love their scents. They have coconut and vanilla, lavender and rose, cucumber and mint, and eucalyptus and mint. And of course, my girlfriend and I love the coconut and vanilla. And so I'm asking you to try this because there's no risk. They offer free returns and exchanges in the USA, and they have a subscription program. So you can use it, and then a new one arrives at your door when you're ready for an update. You can save 17% or $2 a stick and have Native conveniently delivered to your door every 1, 2, 3, or 4 months. So check it out. Go to nativedeodorant.com, and while you're checking out, use the word BRAIN. The word BRAIN gets you that 20% discount, and I want to know if you really love this stuff like we do. Join over 7,000 people who have given it 5-star reviews, and check them out in the Today Show, Women's Health, Good Morning America, all of these places and more that to me prove that Native Deodorant is doing something right in the world. nativedeodorant.com. Use the promo code BRAIN during checkout. Get 20% off your first purchase today. All right, welcome back. I wanted to tell you a story of a client I have that had an issue with his narcissistic mom. And if you don't know what that means, narcissism comes in many flavors, but really it's all about her caring. You know, the narcissist cares about their own happiness regardless of who they hurt, damage, insult, offend. It doesn't really matter. Narcissists usually don't have any empathy either. Narcissists usually don't care what you think, and they'll pretend that they care what you think. They'll play the game just to get you into compliance and then do whatever they want and then blame you when it goes wrong. I mean, there's a lot of things that narcissists do. Listen to my other show, Love and Abuse, and you'll find out what it entails. There's so much to it. But he had to deal with his narcissistic mom for a long time. And, you know, there's a lot of years that go by that when you have a toxic or dysfunctional parent in your life, you don't really want to talk with them anymore. You don't want to face them. Yet you miss the parent. You miss the mom or the dad or the person that you really want to connect with, and they're not there. Somebody else is there. Somebody else is in their place. You want to have a mom-son connection or a mom-daughter connection or a father-son, father-daughter connection. And it's hard to get with certain parents, certain people. And so he had to deal with this for many, many years. But I'm pretty proud of what he's done. I don't know if he's listening right now, but I just talked to him the other day. And if you're listening, I'm proud of you because here's what he did. And I love this. He decided to establish a clear boundary on what was acceptable and what wasn't. And instead of showing up at his parents' house or calling them and saying, how you doing? How are things going? And the same old routine conversation that you might have, and then cringing and waiting for them to do something that you don't accept or don't want. He didn't do that. Instead, he decided to call and say, hey, look, I want a relationship with you. I really do. And in order to have one, we need to establish some rules. 1, you don't call me. I call you. 2, he said this, when we talk, you need to respect who I'm with, what I do. You need to respect my choices in life. You need to respect my life in general. I don't want to get into the conversation that I'm making the wrong decisions or I'm with the wrong people or I'm doing the wrong thing. We're not going to go there. And 3 is kind of wrapping that up. If you don't respect my wishes, I won't call you. I won't stay in touch with you. We can't have a relationship if you're unable to respect my boundaries. He didn't say these exact things, but in general, he's setting up what he wants for a relationship with them. Instead of them, especially her, dictating her relationship with him. And boy, he told me this and I was just so proud. I couldn't say it on our call, but I'm saying it now. I am so proud of you for doing that because that is an incredible way to establish a relationship with somebody that maybe you may not have ever talked to again had you not done that. And so for him, now his relationship with his mom is a lot better. It's a lot more tolerable. It's a lot more manageable. In fact, he has no problem saying, Mom, we're not going to go there. And she'll back off. He's not used to that. It's not something that and I'm putting words in his mouth now, but it's not something he was used to for his entire life. And for him to do this now gives him 2 things. 1, it takes him out of waiting for something bad to happen. And that's an anxious feeling. That's a crappy feeling. You don't want to feel that way every time you talk to someone in your life, especially family. And so he's out of that state of mind. It may still linger here and there, I'm guessing, like, oh, here she goes. You know what? I'm going to nip that in the bud and I'm going to address that right now. So number 1, he's out of that anxious state of continually hoping she doesn't show up that way again, hoping that she doesn't have any toxic behavior, hoping she doesn't bring up so-and-so and ruin the conversation. He gets out of that by saying, you know what, this is what the conversation's going to be about. He took a stand for himself. It's self-love, it's self-compassion, and he did it. And so, number 1, he's no longer in any type of fearful, stressed out state when he talks to his mom. Now, number 2, he feels good knowing that the boundaries are now established and they're understood by both him and her. She understands the boundary and she now is trying to be careful not to cross those boundaries. And that is such a different relationship than they had. But it took him standing up and saying, you know what, this is the relationship I want. I mean, this is after years without contact. He just had to get her out of his life, but he still wanted, quote, mom. He still wanted mom. Where's mom? And he can't have the relationship that he necessarily wants to have with his mom, but he can have a relationship with her. But it required him defining what the boundaries are and what the structure of the relationship would be so that he could have a relationship with her. Because I tell you what, the narcissist or any type of emotionally abusive person wants to control the relationship. They want to control every aspect of the relationship and wants to keep you in defense, in emotional hurt, In submission, the narcissist or any emotionally abusive person wants to keep you in a place of weakness, of insecurity, of fear even. And they'll say the exact opposite. Of course I don't want you to be afraid. Of course I want you to be confident. I mean, a lot of them will say this just to make it sound like they're the good guy or woman. They're the one that is trying to help you. They're the one that wants to see you as a success, but they make you fail. They set you up for failure. And so I look at my client who said, you know what, this is the relationship I want to have with my mom. I am going to establish these rules. And how does he enforce the rules? Because what if she starts going off like she used to? What he does is say, well, we're not going to have a relationship then. I mean, he doesn't tell her this. But what I see is that his mom does love him, or at least wants him in her life in some way, shape, or form, and doesn't want to lose that relationship, doesn't want to lose that connection, and knows that if she crosses his line by violating his boundaries, then he will stop communication with her. And what that does is create accountability for his mom. That is setting boundaries. That is telling people this is what I will accept and won't accept in my life. And you have to follow that rule. And if you don't like it, I'm sorry, we can't communicate. We can't stay in touch anymore. And I know it's hard. It's a hard thing to do, especially with someone that you really want to have a deep bonding connection with. But if you try to have that connection, if you try to bond with this person and it always ends up in pain, you have to control the relationship. Because if they've been in control of the relationship this entire time and you've been on the defense and you've felt hurt and you've felt weak and powerless, then it's time to get on the other side. And you may not want to be controlling. I understand that can happen. I don't want to control. I don't want to have to do that. If you want a relationship with someone like that, you might have to. And he's happier. This can make you both happier. It kind of reminds me of, and this is going to be a terrible, terrible analogy. It kind of reminds me of a bad dog. A bad dog can do anything it wants. A bad dog can live with someone who says, I don't care where he sleeps. I don't care if he jumps all over my guests. I don't care if he barks all night. I don't care if he eats pizza out of the pizza box on the table. I'm not saying that people do this or if it's all bad behavior, but we're looking at very undisciplined, very unstructured environment for a dog. So a quote bad dog, there are really no bad dogs, but a quote bad dog doing this kind of behavior controls the relationship. The dog is in control. The dog gets to do whatever he wants. And if there's no discipline, there's no structure, you can say down, down, and no, don't do that, and he'll do it again. There's no stopping him because there's no structure. So what my client did was create a structure, create an environment of discipline. And it's working. And so the reason I compare it to a bad dog is because if you hired a trainer to come in and train that dog, the trainer is going to have to start from the ground up and get the dog to listen to commands and understand the new structure, understand the hierarchy, understand the leadership role, and follow the commands and follow the rules. And this is what my client did. He set up the structure and set up the leadership role and had to become the person who ran the show, which is the relationship. And so the dog trainer creates the structure, creates the hierarchy, and soon the dog follows the commands and understands the structure and stops jumping on people and stops jumping on the table and eating the pizza and stops barking all day and all night because the dog is now more comfortable knowing the structure, knowing that there are rules to follow. And like I said, I equate that to someone who's very undisciplined and unstructured and perhaps narcissistic and emotionally abusive. When they are in control and can make all the rules, then they're a wild card and you don't know what to expect. Well, you might know what to expect, but they're going to have behavior that you definitely aren't fond of. But when you create the rules and create the structure, you both win because now they know the rules. And a lot of people like that don't necessarily like the rules or follow the rules, But once it's created and they understand the reward system is a deeper connection, which is something they probably want anyway. Even narcissists, full-blown narcissists, probably want some sort of connection. They may have no empathy, but they want some sort of connection. They want to feel loved. They carry around such a deep fear, this deep fear that they hide from the world and then come up with this obnoxious, dysfunctional behavior. But they do want love and connection. That's how we're built. We want to connect with other people. So if you created a structure and a dynamic that allows them to get that, but according to your rules, you have a win-win. They're not going to like it at first, but if the reward is some sort of connection, and you make sure that you hold them accountable if they don't follow the rules, which my client does by telling her, well, too bad, I told you not to go there and we're going there. Goodbye. Click. I don't know if he's that blunt, but that's the gist that I got. And it has made a huge difference. When he talks about her, there's no stress in his voice. There's no anxiety in his voice, which is such a different emotional state than when we first talked. So there can be a way for you to establish a relationship with someone toxic in your life as long as you control the relationship, as long as you lead the way. And when they stray, you make them pay. No, you give them accountability. You tell them this is what it needs to be. If it's anything less than this, or I feel like you're trying to hurt me emotionally or make fun of who I'm with or make fun of my job, then we'll stop the conversation. I mean, listen to my voice and my inflection, my confidence when I pretend to talk to someone that might be toxic in my life. I might say something like, hey, look, I want to talk with you. I want to have a conversation with you. I want to bond with you. I want you in my life. But if you start to go down that road and you try to find things that hurt me, that make me feel bad about myself, that make me feel guilty about my decisions, then I'm going to hang up the phone. And I don't want to do that. So I'm telling you this because I love you and I want to have a relationship with you. So I'm just setting up some boundaries right now. And the way I used to be, where I would be more submissive and I just let you walk all over me and make me feel bad for my decisions, I'm not going to let that happen anymore. So let's have a real conversation and let's not go that route. Are you willing to do this with me so that we can have a relationship? I might even say it with more compassion in my voice, more love. Are you willing to do this with me? Can you do this with me? And the narcissist might say, what? Of course I don't mean to make you feel bad. Of course this, of course that. And you might be able to say, well, you may not know that you did that, but you did. And so I want to make sure that it never goes that way. And I'm going to let you know if it does. So I'm just looking for a place we can meet in the middle. And so you say that with conviction and confidence that you feel good about your decision. Instead of approaching it meekly or subtly or passively and saying, well, I just don't want to be hurt anymore. And I don't want you to, tell me. You can hear it in my voice. I just feel powerless again. I want you to feel powerful. I mean, if you want a relationship with someone that might have been toxic in your life, you need to reach in and get that power and feel confident and create the rules so that you can have a relationship. Otherwise, you may not have any relationship at all because you'll never want to talk to them because they're just so toxic and you have no tools or resources to handle it. So you just never call them, you never visit them. But there is a way. I've seen the outcome both in my own family and my client and what he established with his mom. So I hope this helps you if you're dealing with any type of toxic person in your life. A lot of this episode has to do with establishing boundaries, of course. And there's a lot of people out there that are not ready to do that. Establish boundaries. Oh, that's going to cause so much conflict, so much chaos. Well, listen to this show again to start building the confidence in you. Listen to my episodes on building up your self-worth and your self-esteem. There's a ton of episodes I have in the past about that, as far as really empowering you to create the life you want and establish the relationships that you want, and either keeping the toxic people out or controlling the relationship so that the toxic people show up in a way that's not toxic. And if it is, they will be accountable. And that accountability might just mean you don't have a relationship with them at all. And if they do care about you, they'll want a relationship, which is why this can be, and usually is, a win-win. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll be right back. I'll say some thank yous and my goodbyes and my final words right after this. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Overwhelmed Brain. I want to thank Native. Go to nativedeodorant.com and use the promo code BRAIN during checkout to get 20% off your first order. We use it. We love it. Check it out. I also want to thank members of the TOB Patron program over at patron.theoverwhelmedbrain.com. It is not Patreon. It is Patron, Patron. And the reason I say that is because Patreon is a way to support podcasts as well. And I've always had patron.theoverwhelmedbrain.com. So anyone that gets value from listening to this show can give back, and that's the way to do it. Plus, I give back to you again through the Patron program, which provides a bunch of private episodes, discounts on workbooks, and discounts on my coaching even. I don't really advertise that too much, but it's in there if you want to coach with me. Just become a member of the Patron program. Patron.theoverwhelmedbrain.com. Thank you, existing patron members. I appreciate you. I also want to mention my other podcast, Love and Abuse. We talked a little bit about emotional abuse today and narcissism, difficult relationships, especially in the holidays and get-togethers. That show is all about difficult relationships, and it covers a lot of what I talk about in the Mean Workbook. If you're not familiar with that, head over to loveandabuse.com, and it tells you all about it. But if you have any type of difficult relationship in your life, I highly, highly recommend going to loveandabuse.com, listening to the podcast. And if you're trying to figure out exactly what behavior is causing you difficulty, get the Mean Workbook. Again, over at loveandabuse.com. And finally, I'd like to thank Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com for some of the music transitions in The Overwhelmed Brain. And in conclusion today, I know there's a lot that I talked about that involves probably a lot of internal steps for you to take to get to the point where you might have to be in order to implement some of these steps that I outlined today. And what I mean by that is if you're not in a space where you even feel worthy enough to establish boundaries, then you need to get into that space first. I mean, I'm the kind of guy that will probably go out there and just do something, even if I don't feel worthy, even if I don't feel confident, even if I don't feel brave, because I want to find out the results of what I do. What is the outcome of something instead of the story I made up about the outcome. In other words, I might think, well, if I say that, that person will yell at me, so I better not say it. And instead of just believing my story, which makes sense and it's probably true, and I have no reason to believe it's not true, I'm just going to try it out and see what happens. And so that's a big step to take for a lot of people. It's hard to be in that space where you just risk it. It feels like a risk. It feels like this could be the end. This could be that person yelling at me, firing me, punching me in the face, killing me. I'm not saying I do it in dangerous situations like that, but I've come to learn that most situations aren't dangerous. Standing up to your irritating coworker at work is probably not dangerous unless they're a little psychotic. You got to pick your battles wisely, but most situations are not dangerous. Most interactions are not dangerous. We just make them dangerous in our head to stay away from conflict because we don't want conflict. We don't want to set something in motion that makes our life difficult from that point on. But usually what happens is we make up stuff to avoid it. And so, not all the time. Sometimes we're 100% right. We know that if we say this thing to that person, they're going to do X. And we don't want to face X and we don't want to deal with X. So we just hold on to what we want to say, to how we feel inside. We hold on to it. And that's what I was talking about earlier. What are you holding on to that you continue to carry with you throughout life? That if you don't let it go, if you don't express it, that you just keep making up stories of what will happen if you do express it, if you are your authentic self. And you carry that stuff around and you don't get the results you want. You just end up hiding from so many things that could be different. And that's tough because you don't know it could be different until you do it. And that's tough too. If you're not in that space, like I said, there might be a lot of internal steps to take first. Some people do feel very powerless or very weak, emotionally, mentally. And if you're in that space, it does take some huge leaps of faith. It does take a lot of mental strength just to get to the next step, just to get to the next minute of the next hour of the next day. How do I get to that next step? So hard to do for some people, and I understand that. I'm not saying that if you can't do anything I said in this episode today, that there's something wrong with you. I'm saying that this is the point when you are ready to do it, that your life will change. I mean, your life does change every forward step you take, into your own personal growth and development. But getting to the point where you can lead your own life and define how you want to relate to others and how you want them to relate to you, your life changes. And I think it can be very helpful to get to the point where you do take some risks. And I say that very carefully, knowing that you could end up in overwhelm. You could end up in a terrible position. So this also takes thought. This also takes an understanding of what you could lose, because you can lose. And I mean lose, but I mean you can lose friends, you can lose family, you can lose a job, you can lose a relationship. You can lose those things. And the question is, what do you gain? What do you gain if you lose that? I found a job when I needed one badly, and I lost it. And I survived. I found food when I needed food badly, and I survived. And you look at your past and you think about all the stuff that you needed that you somehow got, and you survived. And so you're going to have challenges that come to you in life, and some of them are going to be awfully hard. But you have a strength inside of you that you can access. And maybe nobody's ever told you it was there, or maybe they tried to tell you and you just didn't believe them, but it's there. And I know it's true because I guarantee that if someone pushed you and pushed you and pushed you and pushed you, you're finally going to say, that's enough. I can't take it anymore. And you're either going to swing a fist back at them, either physically or verbally, or you're just going to forget about your fears and take whatever steps are necessary to stop being pushed. There's a point where we all reach where we just go subconscious. We just hit our bottom, where there's nowhere else that we can get pushed. And right behind us is the ledge to our death. And most of us don't want to go over that ledge, so we finally push back. And that pushback might just be you going, you know what? I've had enough, and I am going to protect and honor myself from this point on. That's the breakdown before the breakthrough. And sometimes that is the best place you can end up. It is the worst place you can end up because it feels so bad. And it's also the best place because it reboots you, it restarts you, and you feel like a different person after that. I think I've gone through at least 3 or 4 reboots and resets in my life where that breakdown led to a breakthrough. And the push can be anything. Someone can push you verbally, mentally, physically, and you'll just get to that point where you say, I've had enough. And you're allowed to get to that point. And if you think you're not allowed to get to that point, keep listening and keep an open mind so that you can step into your power. This will help you be firm in your decisions and actions so that you can create the life you want. Always take steps to grow and evolve. You are powerful beyond measure. And above all, and this is something I absolutely know to be true about you, you are amazing.